ki janouye. Mwen rele Mecca aka Grimmo. Ou konen mois de mai, c'est mois héritage haïtien. M'bra li liv sa, Boukman and Cecile Fatima, The Black Revolution, ki moun ki ekril, Franz Derincourt Jr., cover art by Kervin Andre, illustrated by Eminence System. It was an extremely hot day on the British colony of Jamaica. Jamaica was previously a possession of Spain. But after a series of tricks and furious fighting, Great Britain took control of the island from Spain in the year 1655. The British then authorized the kidnapping of hundreds of thousands of Africans and transported them to Jamaica to work as slaves on the many plantations to produce cash crops for sale. On one of these plantations, an African man was working extremely hard to the point of exhaustion. Although the man was big and strong, the British slave masters forced him and all the other Africans to work from sunup to sundown, no breaks allowed. After a long, hard day slaving on the plantation, the African man found peace and encouragement reading from his favorite book, the Holy Quran. Knowing how to read and possessing books was strictly forbidden for the Africans on the plantation. So the Africans would have to be very careful that he would not get caught disobeying the laws because the punishment could mean his life. He often secretly taught his fellow Africans how to read about his spirituality. The young man gained a reputation on the plantation for the vast knowledge he learned from his book. He became known as the Boukman. Although Boukman was one of the most productive African enslaved on the plantation, he was also known for being rebellious. He would only defy the slave master's orders and stand up for the other Africans being mistreated. Usually the slave masters would not tolerate such disobedience from a slave, but since Boukman was one of the biggest and strongest Africans on the plantation, his master decided to sell him to a different owner instead. The slave master knew that Boukman would demand a higher price at auction. The overseers arrested Boukman and put him on a boat to Saint-Domingue, a French colony not too far away from Jamaica. Although there was nothing Boukman could do about his fate, he managed to get his book and hide it in his clothes. He would never see Jamaica again. Once Boukman arrived in Saint-Domingue, he was immediately let off the boat and placed on the auction block where many French slave masters placed bids to buy him. All the potential buyers were impressed with his size and strength. Just as his former British slave master thought, he sold for a premium price at auction. Boukman was immediately put to work on the sugar plantation in the northern plains of Saint-Domingue. At one point, the plantation commander noticed that he was hiding something in his pants. The commander ordered Boukman to hand over the book, but he refused. The book was the only possession he had, and he did not want to part with it. The commander ordered Boukman to be disciplined for resisting an order. To teach him a lesson, the commander set the book on fire while still on Boukman's body, leaving horrible burns and scars on his skin. The French slave master found this to be amusing. Although Boukman was in physical pain, he was even more saddened and angry that his precious book was destroyed. As the years went by, Boukman had grown to be well-respected by everyone on the plantation. He was then given the job of slave driver. The slave driver or commander would be the person to discipline the African slaves. Slave masters purposely made black people beat other black people so they would resent each other and remain divided. Boukman did not want the job, but the slave master threatened that he would be receiving one of the lashes if he refused. Boukman unwillingly accepted his new position. Boukman would often meet with his spiritual partner, Cecile Fatima, for prayers and rituals. Cecile was a mambo, voodoo priestess, and was also highly respected in the colony because of her strong beliefs and healing abilities. Cecile felt a great energy coming from Boukman and felt that he was the chosen one. Cecile had been planning a slave revolt for many years, hoping to continue the legacy of the legendary maroon Macandal. Cecile would tell Boukman stories of Macandal's revolution and the struggle for freedom in Saint-Domingue. They would secretly perform ceremonies together to gain strength and pay respects to their ancestors. Boukman was a Hooligan, voodoo priest, Voodoo is a special practice inherited from his ancestors in West Africa. After many years as slave driver, Boukman's master promoted him to be his coach driver. The coachman drives the slave master to wherever he wants to go. The year is now 1791, and many events were taking place all around the colony and back in the mother country, France. The French Revolution was in full swing, and the news had spread to Saint-Domingue. The poor French people wanted equal rights for all and were willing to fight for it. Although the French Revolution would not have freed the enslaved Africans, rumors spread like wildfire, and the King of France, Louis XI, would give an extra free day. Boukman and many enslaved Africans believed that the moment was right for them to take action for their own freedom. Boukman and Cecile Fatima decided to recruit all of the influential African leaders from the plantations across the northern part of the colony to meet to discuss the important move. It was Cecile's job to go from plantation to plantation in the middle of the night to give the details of when and where the meeting would be held. She would sometimes travel miles in one night on recruiting trips. It was a risky and difficult task, but she knew the importance of her mission. On a full moonlit night of August 14, 1791, Boukman and Cecile Fatima directed a revolutionary meeting in the thickly wooded Bois Caïman area. 2 delegates from every plantation across the northern attended the meeting. Over 200 frightful yet daring Africans were present. The purpose of the meeting was to put the finishing touches on the slave revolt they had been planning for a long time. Many of the delegates wanted to start the revolution that very night, but the final decision was made to wait until the following week. At the conclusion of the meeting, Boukman and Cecile Fatima performed the voodoo ceremony. Before Europeans introduced their versions of Christianity to Africa, voodoo was the means by which many Africans spiritually communicated with their powerful ancestors, as well as the forces of nature. The enslaved Africans prayed for strength and guidance as they set forth for this fateful journey to freedom. Everyone in attendance took an oath of secrecy and solidarity. Boukman preached a powerful prayer, which would go down in history. On August 22, 1791, the enslaved Africans began to revolt against their masters all over the north of Saint-Domingue. They went from plantation to plantation, burning crops, houses, sugar refineries, and everything else down to the ground. With the spirit of their ancestors with them, the Africans were fearless in their fighting. Boukman led a formidable army of enslaved Africans as well as Maroons. Some estimated Boukman to be at the head of more than 15,000 men and women during the early months of the revolution. Most of the rebels in Boukman's army did not have guns. The rebels used whatever they could get their hands on as weapons: fire, stones, sticks, wood, etc. They mostly used farming equipment, such as machetes, which were used to cut down sugar cane on the plantation. Even though the Africans held an advantage in numbers, the French troops were professionally trained, highly equipped, and disciplined when it came to the art of battle. The rebels did not have advanced weapons like the French military, but they used knowledge of the land and their surroundings to gain the upper hand during many battles. They would use sneak attacks, nighttime raids, and would often ambush the French troops when they least expected it. The African rebel guerrillas' warfare tactics inflicted heavy losses on the French forces. In November 1791, Boukman made a bold attempt to attack the capital city of Saint-Domingue, Cap Français. During the attempt, He was captured by the French military, who rushed to have him executed and presented him as an example to the rebelling Africans. Now that the leader of the rebels was gone, the French slave masters thought that they would eliminate the revolt and force of the Africans when they returned to the plantations as slaves, never to rise up again. They were wrong. The person that would eventually take over the leadership of the rebel army and lead the enslaved Africans to many victories over their European enemies became one of the most brilliant military generals in history. He trained and structured the African rebels into a highly organized and disciplined military force. It soon gained the reputation of being one of the most feared armies in the entire world. He started off as the one who took care of the horses, then rose to become the rebels' army's medicine man, first known in Saint-Domingue as François Dominique Breda. And he gained greater knowledge of himself and his mission. He would eventually go down in history as the great Toussaint Louverture. Boukman did not survive to see the completion of the revolution he helped begin in Saint-Domingue. However, the African rebels were eventually successful in driving the French slave masters out of the colony and creating the first free black nation in the Americas. Many Africans believe that after they died, their spirits go back up to their homeland of Africa. Boukman has taken his place among his powerful ancestors from this kingdom of Dahomey, who also sacrificed their lives fighting colonists for the well-being of their African brothers and sisters. Boukman has cemented his legacy as a fearless fighter, a spiritual leader, and one of the greatest heroes in history. Boukman Dutty.